Chapter 12. Tazir awakened in the late morning to the slap of shroud lines and the tent-muffled conversations of the sailors. Alone, he lay in lazy contentment, contemplating his evening with Astrid. Her love-making made every past partner seem stale and boring. His instant attraction to her appeared understandable. Astrid was a beautiful woman, but the sorceress's desire for a puny thief and their mutual physical and mental commitment seemed too sudden and too complete. Since first seeing the flash of Mordath's Jadestone in Winnis Tavern, Tazir had come to believe in magic. He hoped whatever force had brought them together would remain long enough to allow him to win Astrid's affection in his own way. Tazir rolled to his side. Absently, he kneaded the Jadestone through the fabric of his pocket. Visions of Astrid filled his mind, stronger than in the past. He watched in calm fascination until the images faded. His thoughts turned to the future. Moonbear had informed him that the barbarians' territory lay only a half-day's journey from Amara's port. Surely the Cullensburg patrol will return home now. They wouldn't dare battle a prince in his own kingdom. Tazir rose and dressed, ideas swirling through his mind. He realized with some satisfaction that their arrival in Sweden would not end his obligations nor his restlessness. He would need to help Astrid regain her powers from Mordath, and he'd have to confront Illyrian to learn the truth about his father's execution. The new direction Tazir's thoughts had taken filled him with the kind of excitement he felt whenever he agreed to perform a challenging theft. Sparked with purpose, he emerged from the tent to the sallow spread of sunlight. Sailors trotted the length of Amara's deck, speaking the mangled language Tazir had long ago learned to ignore. He passed them with a gestured greeting and headed aft. Once past the hold and the cooking box, he paused on the quarterdeck, away from the lines and belaying pins. Careful to leave a lane for the sailors, he began a sword practice with newly found exuberance. Charged with cheerful vigor, he launched into a complicated series of sword forms. The cuts, sweeps, and strikes felt smooth, if slightly awkward. He held the final position, considering what criticisms his father would have made if he were still alive. "You're dropping your right shoulder." The words were Captain Tazir Madakin's, but the tone was distinctly different. Tazir froze, shocked. Slowly he turned his head, recalling Moonbear's accusation that he did not know how to listen, and concerned he might have imagined the voice. Ardmore sat amidships, his legs dangling over the combing into the hatchway. "I said you're dropping your shoulder." Tazir sheathed his sword, surprised. It was the first time Ardmore had shown an interest in his practice. "That's exactly what my father would have said. You should have listened to him. It sounds as if he knew what he was doing." Tazir laughed. "I would hope he did. He was a Cullensburg's guard captain for 15.5 years. Ardmore's features crushed together in puzzlement. "Shadow, what's your real name?" Tazir wandered amidships and knelt beside Ardmore. "Tazir," he said. "Tazir Madakin, same as my father." "Captain Taz was your father?" Ardmore seemed incredulous. He studied Tazir in the morning sunlight. "Yes." "He told me about his son. He said his child was small, but you're scarcely big enough to be a girl." "Thanks, Ardmore. I guess I deserve that after asking if you enjoyed the war." Though insulted, Tazir seized the opportunity to uncover more information about the captain's death. "You knew my father?" "Knew him well. I served under him 10 years. Sudden excitement swept Tazir. He pressed. "What happened to him? How was he killed?" "He died on the gallows." Tazir scowled, annoyed with the answer. "Don't you think I know that? The statesman called him a traitor and a coward. I know my father was neither of those things." "So do I," Ardmore agreed. "He was betrayed." "I know." "By whom?" Ardmore sighed loudly, shaking his head. "Taz, your father was killed by his own morality. He was too honest and kind-hearted, always ready to give some deceitful bastard another chance. He would do anything to keep his men alive, yet his ungodly courage made his own life worthless to him. The soldiers loved him, but they were too stupid to understand why. Otherwise, a slick-tongued worm named Illyrian would never have been able to contrive the charges against him." Rage boiled through Tazir. "Illyrian! I knew it all along. Why am I so surprised?" "Your father told me he confronted Illyrian about peddling drugs to the troops, and thereby destroying their ability to fight," Ardmore said. "Treachery and character assassination, those are Illyrian's weapons. He could never have faced Taz in fair combat." "Illyrian," Tazir repeated. His anger funneled unexpectedly against the man before him. He sprang to his feet. "You knew Illyrian slandered my father, your captain. and you let him have my father executed. You allowed the town to crush my family, kill my mother, and force me out to live on the streets." Ardmore threw up his hands in disgust. "Believe me, I tried to help. I cornered Illyrian on the road to the Baron's castle and battered the bastard until he confessed to everything. I would have killed him too, but I needed him at the trial to prove your father's innocence." Ardmore's hands balled into fists. "Illyrian had me locked in the dungeons until after the execution. By then it was too late. I found your mother dead. By her own hand, I think." Tizir winced. "And you had disappeared. The other soldiers wouldn't let me near Illyrian again. I had no reason to remain in Collinsburg." Tizir paced, his earlier contentment swept aside by anguish. "Well, now you'll have another chance. Illyrian has joined the patrol chasing us." Ardmore swore. "That explains a number of things." His gaze followed Tizir's path. "But Illyrian is no longer my problem. When you were a child, I willingly took that burden upon myself. But Tasmadakin was your father. His vengeance has become yours to fulfill." "Illyrian," said Tizir. He felt nauseated. "I'll kill him." Even as he spoke, an image of his mother filled his mind. He recalled the blood, warm and slick on his fingers, and the hollow glare of recrimination in the corpse's eyes. Tizir went still. "I won't kill him. I won't kill anyone. I can't." Ardmore's voice gained all the savage force Tizir's had lost. "Of all the worthless stupidity, you have none of your father's size or strength. Yet you inherited the very thing which killed him, his insane sense of morality and his damnable courage. You can't kill Illyrian, or you don't want to. Sometimes you have to do things, whether you want to or not, even if you know it will tear your heart apart. There are some things which have to be done." Tizir turned away, unable to face Ardmore and his accusations. "I knew you couldn't understand. Death doesn't bother you." "The first time I killed a man, I vomited until my guts felt on fire. I had nightmares for weeks." Ardmore caught Tizir's shoulder, his grip painfully firm. "Anyone who can kill without caring doesn't deserve to live. He's contemptible garbage. He's crazy. No sane person could kill another and not feel something evil. I still have dreams which make me wake in a cold sweat, but nothing can give life back to the first man I killed." Tizir said nothing. Ardmore continued, "Nobody wants to kill. You kill because you must. Sometimes you have to make a decision. Some things are important enough to kill for. Ideals, family, friends. Tasmadakin is dead, but he's still more important than that slime Illyrian. Yesterday you were willing to die for Moonbear, and you told me you've only known each other a few weeks. Your father should seem as important to you as Moonbear, and if you're willing to spend your own life, why not someone else's?" Tizir tried to explain an emotion he scarcely understood himself. "Killing is wrong." Ardmore interrupted. Impatience colored his words. "I can talk all afternoon and it won't mean anything, but with all the violence surrounding you now, I guarantee there will come a time when you need to kill. Either way, a life is lost, yours or your opponent's. The choice is yours to make. If you would rather die than kill, that's your decision. But remember, there's more than your own survival at stake. If you go down, there's a greater chance Moonbear will also, and no one will have slain Illyrian. Once you die, you leave no one to avenge your father." Tizir continued, aware his argument had become futile, yet still morally bound. "I can't kill, not even Illyrian." "Fine." Ardmore released Tizir. "Let Illyrian kill you too. Teach him Adakins are cowards. Someday he'll deceive someone who will kill him. Until then, all the men and women he destroys and all the orphans he creates will have been harmed because you made the decision you would rather die than stand and fight." Without another word, he rose and marched toward the bow. No answering defense came to Tizir's mind. He remained still, staring at his interwoven fingers. Despite Ardmore's reassurances and the simple wisdom of his points, Tizir knew his conscience would never allow him to kill another human being. He stood and shuffled to the railing. The sea lay calm as glass beneath him. Wisps of cloud appeared and curled around the sun. Off to starboard, the sky went suddenly dark. The captain shouted. From nowhere, wind gusted, streaming through the riggings. The sails jibed, then crashed back to port tack. Amara lurched. Tizir slammed into the rail, the breath driven from him. Pain ground through him. His fingers tightened about the railings. This is no normal storm. "Agir's mercy!" An abrupt battering of rain nearly drowned the captain's commands. Amara was tossed to her side. Water sloshed across the deck. Tizir tumbled amidships. His shoulder smacked against the mast. A sailor's garbled words went past him unheard. Then a gruff voice screamed in his own language, "Cut the line!" Gusts slapped the hull, rolling the ship violently. One arm wrapped around the mizzenmast. Tizir pulled Mordauth's dagger and slashed the halyard. The rope parted, spilling wind, and Amara inched windward. The sea anchor rattled from the bow. The sailors scurried about the deck, brought to life by this unnatural, murderous storm. Two fought the bucking tiller in the stern. Tizir saw a water fountain over the coaming and into the hold. Astrid! Realization slapped him with the force of the gale. There is a sickening splinter of wood. Tizir clawed his way to the hatchway. Shifting his weight with the ceaseless floundering of the deck, he scrambled halfway down the companionway. Suddenly, bile green light split the darkness. A figure appeared on the bow, blurred by distance. Mordauth's familiar voice thundered across the deck. "Captain, the gale is mine. Surrender the fugitives." Tizir ducked beneath the deck level. The captain's reply drifted to him, much softer and filled with hesitant uncertainty. "Begone, demon. Me cargo and passengers aren't for bargain." Mordauth's words went haughty with annoyance. "Then I'll smash your ship to timber. Cargo, passengers, and crew. 3 lives are all, Captain. The choice is yours." Tizir's heart slammed against his ribs. Ardmore's challenge rang clear. "I'll kill you, traitor." A sudden gust whipped the bow. Amara reared. Wild footfalls shook the deck. "Stop!" cried Moonbear. "I will not have innocent lives lost for me. I surrender." Tizir awaited Ardmore's inevitable searing rebuttal, but the woodsman said nothing. Concerned, Tizir strained his ears for some evidence Ardmore still lived. Mordauth's tone rose in triumph. "Chain them and place them aboard the dinghy. I want the thief, damn it. I need him most of all." Stung to action, Tizir ran down the ladder. He knew he would also give himself up. There were too many lives at stake, but first he needed to fulfill his promise to Astrid. He sprinted through the hold, jammed open the locked door, and caught the Norsewoman in his arms. She felt warm against him. He embraced her with a selfish violence, aware he might soon lose his life. The ship heeled to starboard. Shouts wafted from above deck. Tizir spoke, his voice thick with grief. "Astrid, I love you. I promised I would free you before the ship reached the Northlands. This is my last chance." Purpose strove through him before she could reply. He seized her hand and hauled her to the companion ladder. "Mordauth may claim my life, but he'll have nothing more. I'll deny him anything I can. Goodbye, Astrid. Good luck." Tizir kissed her quickly, then scurried up the companionway. As Tizir emerged from the hatchway, he heard a cry of recognition. Spurred by a single obsession, he sprinted to the rail. Behind him, he heard yells and muffled footsteps. The captain shouted, "Hole your gale! My men's too busy fighting Amara to catch your thief." The lateen went suddenly still. Tizir grabbed the rail for support. His other hand fumbled in his pocket for Mordauth's possessions. He seized the handkerchief and the ring and tossed them as far out to sea as he could. The cloth fluttered, gently as a feather. The ring struck the water with an impotent splash. Tizir heard the sailors closing in on him. Furiously, he dug through his pocket. He wrapped his fingers about the stolen jadestone and cocked his arm to throw. "Wait!" Astrid's voice surprised Tizir. He had not expected her to follow him above deck. She caught his wrist and pried the faceted gemstone from his fingers. Before Tizir could turn and question Astrid's odd behavior, a wave of arms buffeted him to the deck. Pain lanced through his chest. He lay still, allowing the sailors to pin him down and bind him. The ropes bit into his wrists and ankles. He felt himself hoisted into the air. Tizir searched frantically for Astrid, but the sorceress was nowhere he could see. God's mercy, at least let her escape safely. Caught in the unyielding grip of 2 sailors, Tizir stared into the blue-gray expanse of sky. Under Mordauth's control, the winds had dwindled. The sails hung limply from the yards. While the men carried him forward, Tizir quietly, calmly, explored the bonds on his wrists and ankles with as much finger motion as the ropes allowed. The knots were the work of experts, accustomed to securing lines. Tizir loosed a sigh of grim resignation. But the fight's not over yet. The captain averted his eyes when Tizir reached the bow. Feeling obligated because of the captain's initial staunch defense, Tizir addressed him soothingly. "It's all right, Captain. It makes no sense for you to lose your life and your ship for us. We never meant to cause you any trouble." But Tizir's words only seemed to distress the captain further. His voice cracked, and he gestured feebly toward the taffrail. "Puts 'em with the others." Closer to the rail, Tizir could see the dinghy resting in the water beside the ship. Mordauth sat within it. Moonbear and Ardmore lay gagged on its bottom, their hands and feet bound together behind them. The sight of his two strong companions as helpless captives of the dragon-rank sorcerer sickened Tazir. He offered no resistance as the sailors lowered him to the dinghy by the rope, which connected his wrist to his ankles. Though the maneuver strained every muscle in his body, and pain seared through him like fire. The dinghy rocked sharply as Tazir settled to the deck with his companions. His discomfort settled to a dull ache. The sailors cast off. At Mordath's command, the wind strengthened, driving the dinghy leeward without the necessity for sail or oars. Scarcely beyond earshot of Amara, Mordath seized the ropes which held Tazir and hoisted the thief to his knees. Tazir shifted awkwardly for balance, his face at Mordath's knees, and his friends flat on the floorboards behind him. He focused his gaze on Mordath, but his fingers picked diligently at the ropes. Vowing to stall for the time he needed to free himself, he addressed the sorcerer. "What do you want from us?" Mordath's brows puckered to a scowl. "My gem, Tazir, the rank stone. Where is it?" Gem! Tazir twisted his face in a look of exaggerated puzzlement. A picture of the diamond-cut jadestone filled his mind, an exact duplicate of the gem in Mordath's staff. Rank stone. Realization jarred him to silent self-loathing. The jade I carried as carelessly as a toy is Astrid's rank stone, so that was the attraction. If only I hadn't blinded myself to everything but her beauty, I could have restored her magic before it was too late. Karana's damned. I hope the sailors haven't hurt her. Tazir's finger snagged a loop in the knot. He feigned ignorance. "What gem is that?" Mordath's hungry patience snapped. "You thieving little bastard. You know which gem. The jade stone you stole from me. Where is it?" Tazir fought the ropes, swaying with the toss of the boat to disguise his movements. "I believe I last saw it in Wynneth." He pretended to consider. "Is that right?" Quick as a cat, Mordath seized Tazir's cloak at the throat. His angry green eyes seemed to lay Tazir open. "You still had it on the ship just before I boarded. My spell couldn't track you there." He pulled suddenly. Cloth tore. Tazir staggered on his knees. Sudden anger swept through Tazir. The sea breeze chilled him. Mordath swore violently. He drew a knife and began slicing the pockets and hems of Tazir's cloak and tunic in a frenzied rage. The search uncovered nothing but the sword which the sailors had not bothered to take from him in their haste. Mordath stood, brandishing the blade. "Odin damn you to coldest hell! Where are you hiding the jadestone? Tell me, or I'll slit you stem to stern." Still kneeling on the deck, Tazir replied boldly, "Then I hope your magics allow you to talk with dead people." Mordath reacted with thoughtless fury. He backhanded Tazir's face with a sword hilt. Steel jarred against Tazir's head. His thoughts exploded into hot sparks. Consciousness swam. He loosed a whimper of distress, his struggle to free himself from his bonds forgotten in his anguish. "The jade!" screamed Mordath. Tazir shook his head dizzily, unable to speak. "I won't betray Astrid. I hope that jade restores her powers." By now, Amara had dwindled to a shadow on the horizon. From the corner of his eye, Tazir caught sight of another sailing ship moving north. The guards, he guessed. Apparently, Mordath's storm had been carefully localized to damage only Amara. Mordath raised his hand for another strike. Tazir flinched. The wooden seat gouged into his back. Suddenly, Mordath's features twisted into a glare of arrogant calculation. He let the sword drop to the deck. "I haven't gone fishing for a while. I think I might try some trolling with Moonbear. Probably the first time anyone ever used 220 weight of bait to catch a worm." Mordath pushed past Tazir toward the bow. Tazir scowled. "Don't bluff me, wizard. I know the Baron wants Moonbear alive." Tazir twisted his head to watch Mordath, once again, working at the knots which imprisoned him. Mordath uncoiled a line in the bow and fastened one end to Moonbear's bonds. "On the contrary, Captain Illyrian has given me direct orders to kill both the Swede and Erd Moore." Captain Illyrian? The title seemed a cruel parody. The very thought drove Tazir to fight his bonds even harder. The knot loosened, but still would not give. Clutching the free end of the line, Mordath again stepped around Tazir. His intentions became frighteningly clear. Once in the water, Moonbear would be dragged behind the dinghy. Face down and tightly tied, he would drown. "No!" Tazir flung himself at the sorcerer. His side struck Mordath, staggering him. The dragon-rank mage scrabbled for balance. The boat rolled sideways. Mordath cursed, regained his equilibrium, and skittered to the bow beyond Tazir's reach. Tazir howled in frustration. While Mordath secured the line to the stem cleat, Tazir twisted his wrist. The rope burned painfully across flesh. His hand came free, throbbing as the circulation returned. Abruptly, green light pulsed across the dinghy. The boat rocked dangerously. Mordath whirled. His fiercely hunched posture betrayed surprise. Tizir turned his head to follow the sorcerer's gaze. Astrid stood between Tizir and Moonbear, her golden hair stained an oily black from the combined effects of her transport magics and Mordath's storm. For several seconds, the dragon rank mages stood like carved statues at opposite ends of the courtyard. Tizir worked his other hand free of the ropes. Still bound at the ankles, he dove for Mordath. Mordath hissed. He raised his hand, and a star of light knifed through the air like a sword. Tizir recoiled. Astrid spoke a single word. Sparks arched protectively before Tizir. Mordath's magics struck Astrid's, and both spells exploded in a blinding pinwheel of color. Again, Tizir lunged at Mordath. Yet as he moved, thick emerald smoke enwrapped Mordath, and the sorcerer was gone. Astrid's urgency usurped Tizir's frustration. Untie them, quickly. Mordath's weakening, but he still has control of the winds. Tizir rushed to obey. He seized his sword. Even as he slashed Moonbear's bonds with its tip, wind shrieked down upon them. A swell of water crushed against the tiny hull. The boat rolled violently to one side. Tossed like flotsam, Tizir swung wildly for Erdmore's bonds. Momentarily, he met resistance. Blood splashed the gunwale. A wave knocked Tizir overboard. The dinghy lurched like a dying animal. Then the sea pounded her to wreckage. Battered by storm-churned waters, Tizir fought to swim. Astrid, he screamed, Moonbear! His cries were lost beneath the rain, which pounded down relentlessly. A swirl of gale-lashed current dragged him under. The rope still tangled about his ankles hampered his movements. He gathered his remaining strength and surged to the surface. His face broke water. He found himself staring into a triangular black head as large as his own torso. Horror tore through Tizir. What in Karana's hell? Before he could swim away, another swell toppled him. This time, he emerged near the snake-like body of the creature he had seen. He was shocked to recognize Astrid astride the creature's thorny back, her head low, magics shaped in strands between her fingertips. Behind her sat Erdmore, nursing a gash across his right wrist. Moonbear reached down for Tizir. Astrid's summonings! Mardane's mercy, it's a dragon! Tizir caught Moonbear's sinewy wrist and allowed the barbarian to hoist him atop the creature's tremendous bulk. The brown swirled scales gleamed as slick as wet tile. Tizir could feel the powerful muscles contracting beneath him. Icy gusts stabbed through his soaked and tattered clothing. He clung, shivering. Suddenly, Astrid shouted. Light snapped from her fingers, and sheeted in a small plain between the dragon and the distant ship. Her magics faded quickly. Around the dragon, the wind stopped as if choked, but the rain still splattered from the threatening pitch-colored skies, and merciless gusts whipped the sea outside the sphere of Astrid's protection to foam. Without a word, Moonbear plucked his cloak from over his tunic and breeks, and laid the sodden linen across Tizir's shoulders. Grateful for the cloak's minimal warmth, Tizir drew it close about him. Thank you, he murmured. He knew his gratitude meant nothing to Moonbear, but he felt more comfortable voicing it. Able to think more clearly now that the immediate danger was past, Tizir felt as if he were caught in some hero's tale. Despite the rattle of the dragon's tremendous scales and the billowing motion which was transporting them faster than any ship, Tizir's mind scarcely allowed him to believe in the beast's existence. Tizir turned his attention to Astrid. Her frame remained as taut as wire, her hands shook, her lips were pinched to white lines. It was obvious her battle continued. Mordath's storm battered against her shield, and her sorceries are all that stood between her companions and death. Unable to assist her, Tizir felt as helpless as a newborn baby. Gradually, the sky dulled to orange. Astrid fell to the beast's neck, exhausted, and the sea dragon swam silently toward the distant shore. Chapter 13. Early in the afternoon, Astrid's sea dragon glided to the Swedish shore. Beyond the flat beach where it landed, a forest of spruce and pine swayed in the late summer winds. Shivering, Tizir Madakin slid to the ground. Erdmore followed. Blood seeped through the bandage on his wrist, speckling the cloth with scarlet, but the woodsman made no mention of Tizir's desperate slash which had opened the wound and saved his life. Feeling responsible for Erdmore's suffering, Tizir avoided the woodman's gaze. He watched in silence as Moonbear clambered down over the dragon's dripping black scales and lowered Astrid to the ground. The dragon disappeared into the sea, and beyond it, Tizir saw a square-rigged sailboat running, wind astern for shore. Konigsberg's guards are still chasing us. Though worried by Illyrian's persistence, Tizir's first concern was Astrid. She lay as still as death, though she breathed deeply and evenly. Tizir knelt beside the sorceress, called her name, and prodded her arm forcefully. Astrid opened eyes, glazed as if with fever. She made a feeble gesture, and her voice emerged in a thin whine. "I'll be all right." Her lids drifted closed. Distressed by Astrid's helplessness, Tizir caught her hand. Erdmore stepped between Tizir and Astrid. "She just needs rest. You heard what she said about dragon rank magic costing life energy." He seized Astrid by the armpits, hoisted her to her feet, and tossed her to his shoulder. "There's nothing more Mordath can do to hurt her. Her battle is over and won, but ours has just begun." Grimly, Tizir nodded. Konigsberg's patrol seemed a distant threat. For now, he was more worried about his relationship with Astrid. "I no longer hold a jadestone which drew me to her, yet I still care deeply. When she recovers from the spells which sapped her strength, will she remember or care about the affection we shared?" Tizir watched Erdmore carry Astrid toward the woods, stung with jealousy and self-doubt. "Astrid needs me, and I'm too small to protect her." Ire rose against the woodsman who transported the sorceress's frail frame with natural ease, but Tizir quelled his rising resentment. "It's not Erdmore's fault I'm slight. Astrid and I are fortunate to have such strong companions." The rationalization did little to dispel Tizir's feelings of inadequacy. Quietly, he followed Moonbear and Erdmore to the tree line. Moonbear questioned Erdmore's statement. "Do you think the guards will continue following us now, so close to my village?" Erdmore slits between two pines. Needled branches muffled his reply. "I'm certain. I saw their sailboat heading for shore. It's probably mooring now. Mordath said Illyrian has taken charge. That worm can only be after three things: money, power, or vengeance. Somehow, he's decided killing you will bring one or all of those, and he's willing to waste every life but his own to get it." Tizir trailed his companions like a shadow. Erdmore's revelations raised memories of brave promises made in Shilar's whorehouse, vows to discover his father's slayer. But the knowledge of Illyrian's guilt did nothing to ease his restlessness. "I need Illyrian's confession and some evidence of remorse. I can't fight an army, but at least I've no need to return to Konigsberg to confront Illyrian." Moonbear led the journey through the forest. The sky was as still and calm as glass, with no evidence remaining of Mordath's storm. A northern breeze wound between the trees, rattling the needles in a soft chorus. Tizir felt numb with cold. Astrid's weight burdened Erdmore enough to slow the woodsman to Tizir's pace. In the interest of speed, no one made much effort at silence. A short distance deeper into the forest, Moonbear brought his companions to the bank of a narrow river. "Follow the water. It's the easiest route to my village." Erdmore waved him on. Quickly then, the three men jogged along the riverside. Tizir winced each time Erdmore's motion bounced Astrid on his shoulders. But soon the burble of water and the constant movement became familiar. Their path continued inland. The river formed a deep gorge. Its sides cut sharply upward to granite cliffs, which became steeper as they traveled farther north. Idly, Tizir studied the sheer sides of the gorge, instinctively assessing to see how stable it was. "I could climb it. It would prove difficult. I doubt too many other people could do it." Staring at the forest atop, Tizir felt vulnerable. One man with a bow and good aim could take my life, and I'd never see him coming. Discomforted by his thoughts, Tizir quickened his pace. Gradually, the cliffs diminished, melting into the landscape. The river meandered through a vast plain of conifers. The afternoon sun flashed rays clear as diamonds from the surface of the stream. Astrid's eyes were open now, and she spared Tizir an occasional crooked smile which soothed his doubts. Suddenly, Erdmore froze as a man appeared directly ahead of them. He stood as tall as Moonbear and was nearly as heavy. Brown bearskin covered his burly frame. His hair hung in a tangle of gold. Jabbering in an excited sing-song, he ran for Moonbear. Tizir scrambled from the barbarian's path, then watched with interest as the huge men embraced. The stranger clapped Moonbear's face between hands as large as a lion's paws. Abruptly, he turned and trotted off into the forest. Moonbear explained, "He is a scout for my tribe. We are not far from the village. He will run ahead to let them know we are coming." Tizir smiled, remembering his earlier encounter with the Danwald barbarians. Yet his joy was tempered by the knowledge that their enemies were close behind, trained soldiers with steel swords who would probably outnumber Moonbear's tribe. From his father's descriptions, Tazir recalled the barbarians' greatest handicap was their lack of modern weaponry. I'm the only one with a proper sword. Even Moonbear and Ardmore lost their blades to the sailors aboard Amara. Tazir's realization goaded him to question his friend. Moonbear, why didn't you warn your scout about the patrol? Moonbear's shoulders rose and fell with a maddeningly simple composure. We will tell them soon enough when we arrive. Meantime, we let them have a few moments of happiness at discovering their captured prince returned intact. Though not wholly comprehending Moonbear's reasoning, Tazir assumed the barbarian understood his own people. The thief did not press further. He trailed his companions as they moved from the river and wrestled their way through the densely packed pines. Later that afternoon, Tazir, Moonbear, Ardmore, and Astrid came upon a man-made clearing. A moss-chinked log longhouse rose in the center. At the periphery, half a dozen huts surrounded the central structure. A few fur-clad blond men and women, all tanned and robust, descended upon them. Shouts of welcome drew several more from the longhouse. The barbarians caught Moonbear and his companions in vigorous hugs, not discriminating in the least between the strangers and their long-absent prince. Tazir felt suffocated by the warm embraces. Lost beneath the barbarians' greetings, he was forced to ignore the spatial taboos of his city breeding. The instincts of a thief rose unbidden, and Tazir realized with wry amusement that he could rob any or all the barbarians without the slightest effort. But I'd have no reason to do it. Like Moonbear said, if I needed something he had, he would give it to me. Put at ease by his thoughts, Tazir began to pay more attention to the events around him. The barbarians had relieved Ardmore of his burden by taking Astrid to their longhouse. The woodsmen conversed with the wild Swedes in their odd language. As Tazir threaded toward Astrid, he vowed to learn the northern tongue fluently before leaving Moonbear's people. Astrid sat with her back propped against the longhouse, her face unusually pale. Tazir crouched beside her, his side touching her lightly. When she made no objection, he looped his arm through hers and waited for the chaos around them to sort itself. From his position, he estimated the number of barbarians at 60, including a dozen children and half again as many elders. One of the young barbarian men made an announcement. A great cheer rose from the crowd. Then Moonbear spoke, and the tone of his followers shifted from excitement to sober intensity. Most rushed into the longhouse. A few sprinted for the cottages at the outskirts of the clearing. Moonbear trotted toward one of the huts. Ardmore approached Tazir and Astrid. Moonbear's people wanted to celebrate his return, but he warned them about the guardsmen. They've gone to gather weapons. We'll meet to plan our strategy in that hut. He pointed after Moonbear's retreating figure. If you've any of your father's common sense, we could use you. Tazir flushed, aware he knew too little of battle to be much help. He rose and aided Astrid to stand on her still shaky legs. Here, Tazir unhooked his sword belt. You or Moonbear can make better use of this than me. Ardmore swept a hand through his curled locks. On the contrary, you need it more than either of us. He did not trouble himself to explain further, but moved to Astrid's other side. Come on. Astrid waved Ardmore away. With a shrug, Ardmore started toward the cabin. Tazir refastened his weapon and followed. Astrid leaned heavily against him, but she had at least regained enough strength to walk. Despite the urgency of impending war and the knowledge that he would soon have to fight, Tazir felt reassured by Astrid's closeness. When Tazir entered the cabin, he found Moonbear seated on the floor with 3 other barbarians, 2 males and 1 female. Ardmore sat cross-legged beside Moonbear. Tazir took a place with his back to the door, and Astrid sank to the floor beside him. Ardmore used the language of Cullensburg so Tazir could understand what was being said. How many fighting men do you have? Fighting men, Moonbear considered. 18. Ardmore winced. A standard Cullensburg phalanx has about 50. A massed frontal defense would get us all killed. Tazir's mind raced, disgusted by the huge waste of life which was about to occur because of one man's greed. He thought about their journey from the beach to the barbarian village. Moonbear, where would a sailboat dock after crossing the Kattegat? Moonbear shrugged. Anywhere on the southern shore. Probably the port of Swergerhaven. It is the safest landing. Ardmore took over the questioning. How would an army get from the port to here? Moonbear scratched his head. The same way we can would be best, along the river. It is not the shortest path, but it is certainly the easiest. Ardmore spoke softly, as if to himself. And since they'd have to track us, that's undoubtedly the route they'll take. He turned and faced the barbarian prince. We'll need scouts. They are out all the time. Tazir could hear the barbarians outside organizing with awesome speed. It seemed strange to imagine these friendly people gathered in a cause of war, but that these barbarians had great strength and were skilled in combat he already knew from seeing Moonbear in action. Suddenly, a young woman burst into the meeting. She addressed Moonbear from behind Tazir and Astrid, her words unintelligible to Tazir. She appeared disheveled and breathless, but her voice was calm. Astrid whispered a translation. She's discovered 30 or 40 uniformed soldiers headed for the river. Foreigners, she called them. She found another 12 who remained behind. From her description, I think Mordath's at the camp. Now she's giving the locations. Hell's called a citadel, Shadow. What have you and your friends done? Tazir ignored the barbarians' exchange and turned his attention to Astrid. Do you remember when I broke into your room and you called me a burglar? Astrid nodded. I'm afraid I really am. One of my thefts and the aspirations of a power-crazed, vengeful child of minor nobility are responsible for this. I'm sorry I involved you. Astrid snorted weakly. Nonsense. If not for you and the jade you, acquired from Mordath, I'd be a king's slave, or at best, a wanderer lost in northern Scandinavia. If I ever returned to the Dragon Rank school, it would be too late to continue my training. I wouldn't get through the gates. The scout exited the tent, followed by the other 3 barbarians. Erdmore and Moonbear rose. The woodsman asked, Moonbear, I thought you just told your captain to gather 30 warriors? Moonbear nodded assent. Erdmore threw up his hands in exasperation. You told me you only had 18 fighting men. We do, and we also have 23 women. We do not have a large tribe. We all learn to fight if we must. Our women know weapons as well as our men. Smiling, Moonbear nodded through the open door at the female who had sat in on the strategy meeting. Some better. Great. Erdmore seemed surprised but pleased by the information. He caught Moonbear's arm before the prince could leave the room. One more thing. You can't leave the ambush. Tazir held his breath, appalled by Erdmore's bold undermining of Moonbear's command. But Moonbear maintained his gentle dignity. Why not? Mordath. Erdmore interrupted his explanation to address Tazir. Moonbear plans to arm his people with bows and spears and place them on the cliffs over the river gorge. The Konsbergens won't stand a chance. Tazir recalled the sheer granite sides and realized the barbarians probably would not lose a single warrior. He nodded his understanding. But, continued Erdmore, Mordath can magically locate people he knows. People like me, you, Moonbear, and Astrid. If he discovers us, the ambush will be ruined. Astrid stood. Don't worry about Mordath. He drained his life energy even more than I did. He won't have the strength to cast spells. And he too is getting stronger with time. Erdmore turned his gaze on Astrid. Can you tell me for certain he's too weak to cast? Can you guarantee he won't regain his power before we spring our trap? Of course not. I can only guess, said Astrid. But I'm reasonably certain. Moonbear interrupted with jarring force. Certain enough to risk 30 lives? Astrid lowered her head. Tazir curled a confronting arm across her back. Erdmore turned back to Moonbear. There are 2 places we cannot let Mordath find. The current location of your warriors and this village. And there's only one way I know to render Mordath's spells useless. We need to find him first. Tazir winced, alarmingly aware of what Erdmore's plan meant. The 4 of us are going to challenge a dozen soldiers at their camp. Moonbear allowed the doors to swing shut. I could bring some of my warriors. No, Erdmore said quickly, and with more force than necessary. We need your warriors for the ambush, and to guard your children and elders if the fighting fails. He considered. Besides, your warriors may misunderstand my methods. Illyrian and Mordath want us. I'll not risk your people's lives unnecessarily. He glanced down. Astrid, is the person carrying the Jadestone still undetectable to Mordath? Astrid stood graciously. That was a property of my spell, not the gem. The moment I reclaimed my powers, Mordath could once again locate me. Then you'll have to come along. Erdmore headed for the door. The suggestion charged Tazir with concern. He leaped to his feet. Enough, Erdmore. She's too weak to go traipsing through the forest. Erdmore's voice went gritty with annoyance. The Moonbear can carry her. She can't stay in the village, and she's safer with us than alone in the woods. Come on, we're wasting time. He pushed through the doorway into the clearing. Moonbear followed. Alone with Astrid, Tazir paced. He had no choice but to accept Erdmore's plans. The woodsman knew much more about combat, and his explanation seemed logical. But the promise of war weighed heavily upon Tazir despite his natural thrill for action. Pinned beneath the loathsome burden of his mother's death, He studied Astrid in the gloom of the cabin. I can fight for her. I could die for her if necessary. But even for Astrid's survival, I don't know if I could take another life. Struggling against his own conscience, Tazir tightened every muscle until his arms ached with effort. Unless he could overcome his own compunctions, he knew he would be slain in the coming battle. He turns to memories of his father for direction. To become a warrior, a man must kill himself inside. Once he has reached this realization, he fears nothing. No one can do him harm. But, for once, the elder Mondakin's words failed to comfort. Even the anticipation of performing against steep odds lacked its usual allure. This time, success would require Tazir to kill. Astrid spoke softly, apparently misunderstanding Tazir's distress. Erdmore's right, of course. It's unlikely, but if Mordath has regained enough strength to cast spells, you will need me along. Lost inside himself, Tazir did not reply. One by one he forced his muscles to relax. Let's go. He held the door for Astrid, then trailed her into the early evening haze. In the clearing, skin-clad barbarians massed in grim expectation, clutching spears, bows, and clubs. A few carried swords of copper, bronze, or steel. Moonbear gave some final instructions to his commander, then accepted a pair of crafted longswords from a woman nearly as large as himself. In no formation, the barbarians melted into the forest. Moonbear stared after his departing warriors, his face twisted in a grimace of concern. Without looking toward Erdmore, he offered him one of the swords. Tazir watched while Erdmore examined the length of a crudely made bow, a quiver of turkey feather-fletched arrows balanced across his back. He took the proffered sword and jammed it sheathed through his belt. Ready? His gaze flitted from Moonbear to Astrid and settled on Tazir. Sweat prickled Tazir's skin despite the first stirrings of excitement. Let's do what we must. Softly as a deer, Erdmore slid between the gathered pines. Moonbear glided silently after him. Tazir and Astrid followed with less grace and dignity. The sorceress clutched Tazir's arm with trembling fingers and did not speak, but otherwise she seems to have physically recovered from her ordeal. As they pressed through stands and clustered copses of evergreen, Tazir monitored her location carefully. The spines of pine and spruce stabbed through the drying remains of his clothing, but anticipation dulled pain beneath a steady wash of adrenaline. The heavy snows of Scandinavia, which limited the coastal woodlands to conifers, also kept the lower areas freer of vines and underbrush. A layer of brown needles crunched underfoot with far less noise than the broad oak and hickory leaves on the southern continent. Erdmore held the lead. At times he told Moonbear, Tazir, and Astrid to wait while he scouted ahead, then returned to gesture them in a different direction. Often the woodsman consulted with Moonbear, but he never allowed the barbarian prince to take command of the group. And, in his quietly accepting way, Moonbear never complained nor demanded. An hour crawled to the next. The sun sank toward the western horizon, forming a tail of colored semicircles. Now more familiar with forests, Tazir reveled in his own developing stealth. He no longer wasted time dodging deadfalls or wrestling vines. He learned to judge pathways at a glance. Though still slower than his more experienced companions, he managed to maintain a reasonable pace, and Erdmore's frequent stops made keeping abreast of Moonbear even easier. A quarter of the way through the third hour, Erdmore returned from one of his scouting jaunts wearing a strange half-smile. He grasped his longbow in his left hand and again scrutinized it for defects. He looped the string over one end and allowed it to dangle. Stay close. Before Tazir could question him, Erdmore pushed through the trees with Moonbear at his heels. Tazir caught Astrid's wrist and straggled through the needled branches. They emerged in a vast clearing hemmed by scrub pine. 10 soldiers lounged around the central fire, wearing the red and black uniforms of Collinsburg's guardsmen. Their shields and weapons lay spread across the dirt. Smoke curled from the blaze in a weak parody of the gray-tinged sky. At the farther end of camp, Mordath sagged, his back propped against the trunk of a towering spruce. Beside him, Illyrian studied his own hands in the evening haze. Shocked by Erdmore's direct approach to a camp full of enemies, Tazir inched into the shadows beyond the brightly lit circle of the campfire. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a guardsman glanced in their direction. He shouted an alarm, and the others leaped to attention. Illyrian rose, shrieking blasphemies an octave above his normal voice. "Men, kill them!" The soldiers scrambled for swords. Red highlights bounced from rising shields, spinning like wraiths between the trees. As the Collinsburgian guardsmen closed, Tazir forced Astrid behind him. He reached for his sword hilt. The sorceress whispered, "Keep your attention on Illyrian. Mordath and I are both still too weak to cast." Erdmore's voice, though deadly calm, boomed over the crash of readying weaponry. Stop. Stand where you are, or Illyrian dies. The men hesitated, glancing toward their captain. Illyrian stood, still and tense, his face locked in an expression of murderous outrage. Ardmore addressed Illyrian directly. You haven't enough soldiers here to keep me or Moonbear from killing you. Call off your men, right now. Illyrian looked from the massed soldiers to Ardmore. His glare withered to a frown of discomfort. Men, stand in formation. Stay alert. Don't trust them. The soldiers held their positions, their weapons readied. Mordath yelled suddenly. His tone was harsh, but it lacked his usual resonant authority. Fools, slay them all. The guardsmen shifted nervously, awaiting their captain's signal. Ardmore took a bold step toward the guards. Tizir squeezed Astrid's fingers reassuringly while the woodsman spoke. I've brought them, Illyrian. If you can keep them, you can have them, but I want you to know I'm on their side. The soldiers remained still and anxious. Illyrian's face framed the same calculating grin he'd worn when he had confessed his betrayal to Tizir in the Baron's dungeon. That wasn't our deal, Ardmore. You promised to deliver the barbarian and the thief unarmed. Tizir loosed a startled gasp of realization. So, Ardmore too would double-cross friends. Uncertainty sank beneath a wild rush of anger. Memory surfaced with glaring clarity. He recalled Ardmore's insistence on fetching the drinks in Kalmarport, mugs of beer which had turned out to be poisoned. Tizir berated his own blindness. City-born, street-raised, and meshed in the underground, and I'm still too damned gullible. He edged deeper into the darkness, no longer certain whom to trust. Ardmore countered Illyrian's challenge. The way things were doesn't matter. What's important is how they stand now. You have a choice, Illyrian. He dropped his voice to an unsettling growl. The remainder of your soldiers, the ones you were too much of a coward to lead, are being slaughtered by barbarians in an ambush. The barbarians will finish their play soon and arrive here before nightfall. It won't take long for them to clean up what few of your men might have had sense enough to learn to fight. Moonbear said nothing, his stance characteristically relaxed. Tizir remained poised and wary, awaiting Ardmore's next pronouncement. The brooding tension of the guardsmen seemed tangible. Ardmore continued, If you attack us, between Moonbear and myself, we'll kill at least half, if not all of you. The 3 survivors aren't going to be enough crew to sail your ship. The barbarians will hack down whoever remains. Now, if you want a chance for some of these men and possibly you to leave alive, all you must do is fight, Illyrian. 1 man against 1 man. Fair combat, something you know little about. Tizir's rage dispersed, leaving him feeling cold and empty. Of course Ardmore joined us when his loyalties were with Collinsburg. Did I expect him to league with criminals? At least he's shown enough common sense to switch his alliance to us, and his brave challenge may save the lives of 10 soldiers, Moonbear's, Astrid's, and mine as well. Illyrian's reply went shrill. I can't fight you, you know you'd kill me. That's the only reason you're willing to resolve this conflict 1 against 1. Ardmore fingered his bow. I'm not expecting you to fight me. He patted his sword, and the guardsman pressed forward. I have a decent blade. I wouldn't soil it by splitting your ugly head. If I just wanted you dead, I would have remained in the woods and put an arrow through your chest. But Tizir here. His gaze probed the evening haze. He sidestepped and waved toward the location Tizir had occupied before his careful fade beyond the firelight. Tizir Madakin must avenge a murder you committed. Horror shattered Tizir's composure. He wants me to fight. He knew raw fear for the first time since childhood. His throat tightened, strangling speech. A wild surge of excitement made him giddy. Illyrian's voice came to Tizir as if from a great distance. What are you talking about? You may as well admit it. Ardmore's hands balled to fists, but his features remained placid. We both know you killed Taz's father. 8 years ago, you had your captain executed because you never had the courage to challenge him to fair combat. Illyrian went rigid. Liar! He screamed. Casually, Ardmore strung his bow. You calling me a liar is as ludicrous as me addressing you as a woodsman. The men you command now know you're a devious, manipulative worm, or at least the stupidest bastard on the beach for getting 30 or 40 of their companions killed. If you walk away from this shore, your own men will probably murder you before you return to Collinsburg. I know I would if I were among them. His eyes goaded each of the guardsmen in turn. Illyrian, you've nothing to lose by admitting you contrived the charges against Captain Tizir, except you won't die with a lie on your lips. He fingered an arrow fletching. Illyrian turned scarlet with rage. Attack! Quick as a cat, Ardmore knocked the arrow and aimed for Illyrian. Freeze! The soldiers went still. Ardmore finished. Fine, Illyrian. Do you think they're faster than an arrow? I'll bet none of them dives in front to catch it for you. Now, call them off. Illyrian's head sank in subdued dejection, but Tizir recognized an alertness beneath the nobleman's feigned demeanor. Men, stand as you were. Fine, Hunter. I'll fight the thieving little coward, but I want some assurances. If I win, my men and I can leave undisturbed. Agreed, said Ardmore. Moonbear nodded assent as the woodsman continued. And if you lose, I want your men to promise to go immediately. The men, Illyrian, because I don't trust your vows. At a word from Illyrian, the soldiers dispersed to the edge of camp. Mordath staggered to his feet, clutching the tree trunk for support. Illyrian remained, his eyes locked on Tizir. He wore an expression of calm indifference, as if he found the outcome of the conflict a foregone conclusion. Sweat soaked Tizir's palms. His mouth felt as dry as cotton. I'm not going to fight, he whispered hoarsely. I told you, Ardmore, I just can't kill. Ardmore replied, as softly and matter-of-factly as an instructor explaining a difficult sword form. You've run all your life, son. You've come to a corner. Now, you either fight for your life or lose it. If you refuse to fight Illyrian, you still fight, only with odds of 12 against 4. Would you see Moonbear and Astrid dead to avoid doing battle with the worm who killed your father? Tizir loosed a strangled cry of frustration. You bastard! You backed me into that corner! Ardmore shrugged. The method doesn't matter. The conflict is between you and Illyrian. It always was. He turned away, but not before Tizir recognized concern in the brown depths of his eyes. Tizir steeled himself. He approached Illyrian, hiding fear behind an outward calm confidence he had learned from his years in Collinsburg's street gang. Anticipation blurred the nobleman to dark shapelessness. Illyrian's sword slid from its sheath, lit red by the sunset. Tizir curled steady fingers about his own hilt. Illyrian waited only until Tizir stepped within sword range. He hissed, I did kill your father. It was easy. An anguished gasp escaped Tizir's throat. In the moment of hesitation, Illyrian lunged. An instinctive sidestep spared Tizir's life, but Illyrian's blade slashed his left arm. Pain jarred to Tizir's shoulder. Off-balanced, he raised his sword to block a second blow. Steel hammered on steel. The force sent Tizir lurching backward. Illyrian pressed his advantage with a cold enjoyment. Repeatedly, his sword swept for Tizir, only to meet a harried web of defense. Each well-aimed stroke drove Tizir further back. Soon, the nobleman's superior strength wore on Tizir. His arms ached. Blood dripped from his torn arm and rolled down his crossguard. Pine needles prickled through the back of his torn cloak. He realized with alarm that he could no longer retreat. Determination rose within Tizir. Illyrian's sword crashed against his with jarring force. Tizir riposted. He slashed with fierce desperation. Illyrian backstepped. Tizir's blade clove air. He followed the strike with wild sweeps for Illyrian's head. Inexperience made him unpredictable. His strokes were frenzied. Illyrian retreated before Tizir, meeting the crazed lunges with defensive flicks of his sword. He bided his time, apparently seeking a pattern to Tizir's rapid assault. Suddenly, he skipped aside. Tizir's blade descended on air, throwing him off balance again. Illyrian hooked his foot around Tizir's heel. The thief crashed heavily to the ground and rolled. Illyrian's sword howled next to his ear and swept past. With practiced agility, Tizir regained his feet. The combatants squared off. Tizir paused, catching his breath. Illyrian's sneer of triumph emphasized Tizir's weakness. Again, he raised his sword. Illyrian bore in. He hacked at Tizir's unprotected side. Tizir blocked. Before he could return the strike, Illyrian lunged again. Tizir met the sword in mid-sweep. Abruptly, Illyrian changed the direction of his attack. Surprised, Tizir sprang aside. Illyrian's blade opened a ragged hole in Tizir's thigh. Blood spilled forth, but the steady high of exertion precluded pain. Tizir staggered to one knee, overemphasizing the severity of the wound. Let the bastard think he has me. With a howl of wicked victory, Illyrian hewed for Tizir's head. From the ground, Tizir arched his sword in defense. His blade slammed into Illyrian's knee and bit through flesh. The nobleman dropped instantly. Tizir yanked his sword free and leaped to his feet. Blood sprayed from the wound. Tizir raised his blade for the killing stroke. Illyrian cringed against the dirt. His dark eyes were wide with fear. His face twisted into a pall of panicked accusation. Wind streamed through the clearing, throwing the fire into a wild dance. Tizir's sword arm shook. Pain descended upon him in a mad rush. Every muscle in his body ached. The steady trickle of blood from his wounds made his stomach lurch. He studied Illyrian's lined features in the dying sunlight and realized what he'd known all along. I can't take a man's life, not even one who would kill a friend and live a lie. Tazir lowered his sword. Illyrian, get up. Get out of here before I change my mind. Illyrian struggled to a sitting position, and his lips pressed together in relief and triumph. Stay where you are, Illyrian. Ardmore's voice echoed through the gathering darkness. He addressed Tazir. Taz, if you really wish to free him, it's your decision. He's your problem. You have to live with the consequences of your choice. I only ask that you think before you decide. Illyrian remained unmoved. Sweat beaded his upper lip. Moonbear's voice emerged in a soothing sing-song. Shadow, ask your father. Tazir locked his eyes on the nobleman. He searched his mind for his father's advice, which had come to him so easily in the past. But this time, memories of the elder Madakan eluded him. The words which echoed through his head had been spoken by Ardmore. All the men and women Illyrian destroys, and all the orphans he creates were harmed because you made the decision you would rather die than stand and fight. A scene sprang clear in Tazir's mind, a day in Collinsburg's dungeon when he stared at a wall splashed with his own blood. Illyrian's rat-like features hovered over him. His voice had rattled with malicious joy. Years ago, your father menaced my rise to power. You can see which of us was destroyed by it. Self-righteous anger goaded Tazir to action. Better Illyrian than the innocents who stand in the path of his rise to power. Tazir reversed his grip and drove the blade through Illyrian's chest. The steel jarred around the breastbone and glided easily through flesh. Illyrian flopped to the ground, his expression oddly peaceful. Torn by grief, Tazir dropped to his knees. Tears burned his eyes like fire. The voices around him muted to distant noise. He hunched, weeping over the pale, still corpse of a man he had hated. But the figure which filled Tazir's mind was a heavily muscled warrior swinging lifeless from the gallows, a man for whom Tazir had never been allowed to cry. The lapse in Tazir's defenses lasted scant moments. Years among the street-toughened gang of orphans had taught him to hide weakness, and the expression he turned toward Moonbear was placidly composed. He leaped to his feet, his face bunched to a defiant glare which dared friends or guardsmen to acknowledge his tears. But the Collinsburgans' interest in their captain ended with his death. Instead, they stood in attentive silence, watching a grim trio at the other side of the clearing. Tazir followed the direction of their gazes. Mordath crouched. His damaged dragon staff supported much of his lean, haughty frame, but his feline eyes fixed sharply on Astrid. Beside her, Ardmore held a relaxed stance. One tip of his bow rested on his foot, his other hand draped casually across his sword hilt. The woodsman's voice sounded eerily unfamiliar through the evening fog. I thought we had settled our differences and joined in your sister's cause. Why did you betray me? As Tazir watched the unfolding drama, Moonbear bound his wound, and then the barbarian placed his arm across Tazir's shoulders. Though he said nothing, his gesture was heavy with meaning, deep, heartfelt, fatherly concern without a hint of condemnation. They both awaited Mordath's reply. Mordath backstepped. A rock rolled beneath his foot, making him stumble. His face locked in an expression of impassive fearlessness. Illyrian told me about your cruel and ignoble past. What my sister needs is an assassin to free her from an overbearing pirate husband, not some old lover who would slay her in vengeance. The hand on Ardmore's sword hilt tensed to a bloodless fist. What your sister needs is a brother who cares more for her happiness than the ludicrous ramblings of a power-mad nobleman who never spoke a true word in his misery-making life. I love Inge. I would do nothing to harm her, and I believe she loves me, but she loves her father and brothers too. Enough so we sacrificed our happiness together for your father's decree. Enough so that I will spare your worthless life, because I know your death would break her heart. My death. Mordath laughed with withering disdain. I've more than enough power to destroy you. He made a gesture so sudden even Moonbear cringed aside. Astrid spoke softly, yet her tone was as bold as Mordath's motion. He's lying. His life aura has grown faded and thin as an old cloak. It'll be well past nightfall before he can use something as simple as a transport escape. Mordath hissed in a savage blasphemy. Ardmore's tone went crisp. If that school has done nothing else, it's giving you an inflated sense of self-importance. Barring you from completing your education there may provide the best thing for you. This world has much to teach you, at the very least, how to tell real friends from manipulating rats who would use your power and play your ego like a puppet only to cast you aside or kill you. He turned away. See you in Norway, Mordath, under friendlier circumstances, I hope. The sun slipped beneath the western horizon. Night winds whipped down from the north, chilling beneath the tatters of Tazir's cloak. He shivered. The movement jarred his overtaxed muscles, and he realized he would pay for the evening's exertion with days of pain. Boombear gripped Tazir's shoulders. Are you well? Tazir considered. The restlessness which had hounded him since his father's death had departed, lifting a burden far heavier than Moonbear's thickly muscled arm. But Tazir's passion for excitement was not dulled in the least, only less directed. He'd become aware of a whole new world which was opening before him. Scandinavia's stunted forests promised a challenge of exploration. Her crowded cities were ripe for the agility and wile of a western-born thief. Tazir ducked beneath Moonbear's arm, then caught the barbarian's enormous hand. I'm fine, he said softly. Let's go home. Epilogue. The longhouse door banged shut a dozen times, admitting broken rays of morning sunshine. In the clearing, barbarians laughed and sang in their gruffer version of the Scandinavian tongue. Tazir sighed, no longer able to sleep. He rolled to his side. Pain pounded and throbbed through every muscle in his body, a constant reminder of the events of the previous night. Tazir glanced around the building, which was crudely constructed from logs of varied sizes. The barbarians' bedding consisted of fur pieces spread across the floor, now rolled up and tucked away for the day. The only occupants of the longhouse were Ardmore, Astrid, and himself. Tazir sat up, evoking a chorus of aches. He suppressed a grunt of discomfort. Good morning. Ardmore approached and crouched at Tazir's bedside. Moonbear's people are celebrating his return and their victory. Want to join them? Tazir winced. Not just yet. He met his companion's doe-like eyes, and his question was deadly direct. Ardmore, did you really promise to deliver Moonbear and me to Illyrian? Ardmore pressed his fingertips to the dirt floor. Not Illyrian specifically. I'm a bounty hunter. It's my job. The Baron hired me to catch a pair of fugitives. I tried. He smiled. Luckily, I failed. Tazir shifted position painfully. What exactly made you decide to fail? Ardmore considered. I liked Moonbear almost from the time I met him. He's a capable forester, and his philosophy on war is similar to mine. He settled to one knee. Discovering you were Tasmadakin's son forced me to think about what I planned to do with you. Tazir, your father would be proud of you. Tazir lowered his head. Warm satisfaction suffused him, and he could think of no greater compliment. Ardmore continued, but the barbarians themselves inspired my final decision. They have a peace with the forest neither war nor civilization could take from them, and I suddenly realized I was siding against them to please a baron I no longer served and his troop of half-trained incompetents. Smoke twined into the longhouse, carrying the aroma of fresh meat and roots. The calls of the barbarians in the clearing grew louder. Tazir picked at the bandage on his arm. What about Mordath? Surely his sister could forgive your slaying him in self-defense. Why did you let him go? Ardmore shrugged. I'd no reason to kill him. I can't blame him for protecting his sister. Smarter, more socially experienced men than Mordath have fallen prey to Illyrian's manipulations. Ardmore rose. Mordath's selfish, but not evil. His arrogance is mostly an act. Astrid approached. Her short blonde hair feathered away from her round face. Sleep had restored her beauty to her slight, lithe frame. Desire rose heavily within Tazir, despite his aches. Astrid, wouldn't you rather have seen Mordath slain? Astrid slid to the fur bedding beside Tazir. It would be against the rules of dragon rank for me to raise my hand against him, but our laws say nothing about eliminating an opponent without harming him. In some ways, they encourage it. Plans like Mordath's require creativity, an asset for a dragon rank mage. His trapping me on a ship was a ploy to allow him to continue his education. She caught Tazir's uninjured arm. In his position, I might have done the same thing. Tazir nodded his understanding. Shadow. Astrid seemed uncomfortable. I have to leave now. Leave? Tazir caught her hand in both of his. What do you mean? Why now? My month of vacation is over. If I don't go today, I'll lose my chance at Garnet rank. Mordath will have won. Grief dulled Tazir's physical discomfort. I'll come with you. Astrid freed her hand and brushed the black hair from Tazir's eyes. I have to arrive today, magically. I can only do that alone. Tazir's mind raced. The thought of losing Astrid tore his sensibilities. Give me directions. I'll get there in time. Tears blurred Astrid's blue eyes. Only dragon rank trainees can live on the grounds. We're allowed no visitors, and we may leave the school for just 1 month every year. She wrapped her arms around Tazir and buried her face in his chest. Tazir pulled Astrid closer, feeling her tears wash through the thin cloth of his cloak and tunic. I thought to start a new life today, in a strange world with a woman I love. Anger tore through Tazir. I can't expect Astrid to give up the dragon rank and everything she's worked for. I can't force her to surrender a chance at great power any more than she could make me forsake my ardor for adventure. Astrid spoke, her words muffled in Tazir's clothing. I love you, Shadow. I'll find you again next year, if you've not discovered someone better to share your life. Gently, Tazir pulled Astrid away and met her sorrowful gaze. I love you too, Astrid. We'll get together again soon, I'm certain. Go now. I understand. Tazir pressed his lips to Astrid's in a long and passionate kiss. Then Astrid spoke a few harsh syllables. Green light flared like an exploding star. Smoke rolled through the confines of the barbarian's longhouse. Then Astrid was gone, and Tazir felt as if she had left him crippled and alone. I'm sorry. Erdmore's voice startled Tazir. He had forgotten the woodsman's presence. An odd smile dragged across Tazir's harried features. Don't feel bad. As soon as I learn the location of the Dragon Rank School, we'll be together again. This world hasn't a barrier which could keep me away. Are you insane? Erdmore stared at Tazir, his expression probing. A wall twice Moonbear's height surrounds the school. Dragon Rank initiates prowl the grounds, eager to practice death spells on any thief stupid enough to break into their confines. Tazir, everyone knows sneaking into that school is impossible. Tazir smiled, his interest piqued by Erdmore's words. As it had so many times before, the intimation he would fail became an all-consuming challenge. He recalled the many walls, gates, and holes he had broached, suddenly grateful for the small stature and dexterity which allowed him to consider tasks other men deemed beyond the realm of possibility. Impossible, you say? Tazir grinned with eager anticipation. Thank the gods. I was afraid it would be too easy. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of The Bifrost Guardians, Book 2, Shadow Climber, by Mickey Zucker Reichert. Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and thank you very much for joining me for my production of Shadow Climber from the second Bifrost Guardians series by Mickey Zucker Reichert. This was a fun novel. I had forgotten a lot about this. I thought that Astrid came into play a lot sooner in the novel. I remember Tazir finding her in the palace and she being afraid. When I read this again, I thought that that was just someone else. I didn't know that it was really Astrid. I forgot about her ability to summon dragons, and she summons a dragon at the very end of the novel, and she helps everyone get to safety. How about Illyrian, huh? All the crap that he decided to pull, killing Tazir's dad, his quest for money and power, and recruiting Erdmore to track down Moonbear and Tazir was kind of like any scene in any movie where, they go and they get the best of the best of the best. So that was done very well. Go to the guy's own home turf and come get him to do a task he doesn't want to do, or they hire him to do something he doesn't want to do. But then Erdmore decides to switch his allegiance. At the very end, he delivers Tazir and Moonbear to Illyrian, but he's like, hey man, I'm with them. I don't like what you're doing any longer, and it's not just about money, it's about doing what's right. And seeing Erdmore progress as a character and really care for Tazir and help him out, and say, look, you gotta kill Illyrian, or he's going to come after you forever, and he will always be around to hurt other people. If you don't take care of him now, then he's your problem, and then when he comes for you, we are not going to get involved and help you. Tazir somehow finds the strength to kill Illyrian, the guy who killed his dad, the guy that engineered the death of his father, the guy that made him kill his mother because she was disrespected and outcast by the community, the guy that set his entire life in motion. And that's a big deal. Killing someone's no joke, and Tazir treated it that way until he absolutely had to do what he had to do. Astrid's a fun character. I like how they explained more of how the dragon rank mages work, and that your life force is sort of like your mana, and that the more that you use it, the closer that you come to death, and that the best dragon rank mages figure out how to not expend so much life energy, and that the more that you practice a spell, the better you become at it. That's really cool. All that stuff makes sense to me. The biggest problem I have with this novel is that it is after Godslayer. And after Godslayer's ending, where Galinar and Al Larson descend into hell to go find Sim's soul, you get this standalone adventure about a small thief who is a very reluctant hero and finds a girl that can summon dragons. And somehow they're all going to come into play in Dragon Rank Master, in the third book in the series. I don't know if Erdmore or Moonbear decide to join us again in the rest of the series. I think they are just limited to this novel. I do not think Moonbear will return because he found his tribe and now he's back with them. This was a fun novel. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It has great descriptions. It paints the forest very well. It really highlights how Tazir does not feel comfortable in the forest, and he is way more comfortable in a city setting. And when they finally do get to a city, he kind of takes over the party, and he's like, follow me, everything will be fine. But the biggest issue is that it's the second book in the series, and it just doesn't live up to the expectations of the first novel. In fact, I gave this series to my grandmother to read, and she gets the second novel, and she's like, well, where's Alarum? Where's Al Larson? Where's Galinar? I said they're in book 3, and she's like, take the series back. I don't want to read it anymore. It's just disappointing. I don't know. Tazir and Astrid are fine, but I don't know why the series needs them. I hope that I remember what's going on in Dragon Rank Master, because I haven't read these books in like 20 years. It's been a very long time since I've read them. Do I recommend this series? I absolutely do. If you like fantasy, if you like Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff, you will absolutely love this series. So, what should I read next? I don't know. Please send me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the join button to show your support. Any help is greatly appreciated. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me tell them tales of high fantasy. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.